This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, Show 20. Let's go to Dubai.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramzi Majaba. Ramzi does not like wearing ties, and he can't understand why anyone would ever wear a tie. Hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, SE Nation, and welcome to another show. Thank you guys for being here and choosing to spend your time with me. This is a special show since my guest came all the way from the United Arab Kingdom, so we can have this discussion. He didn't come specifically for that, but we took advantage since he was in Canada visiting family. I like to make it sound that he came specifically for me, but I'm not that important. But before we go on and I introduce our guest, I have some announcements, some housekeeping. I finally got Twitter. I've never used Twitter before. I'm figuring it out. But if you want to follow me, my Twitter handle is @WeTheSEs. So I'm getting the hang of it, and it's just another place you can follow me if it makes your life easier. If it complicates your life, if it distracts you, by all means, don't do it. It's not worth it. I just figured it'll make it easier for people to share what I'm putting out there by retweeting. So that was my thought process. In any case, so going to the second item, I was writing blogs. I haven't put anything out there for the last 2 weeks, but I have around 7 posts out there. So due to time constraints at home and at work, I found myself rushing the posts. So they weren't as good of a quality as I wanted them to be. I did get good feedback about them. It's just I wasn't happy with them. So for the time being, I'm slowing down. I'm not posting anything in September. I wanted to have a few posts in my back pocket, and that way I can schedule them to come out every 2 weeks instead of every week. That way I'll keep putting stuff out there, but I'll keep the quality high as well. So that's important to me. We'll figure it out from there. If I can actually write posts that are good enough for a weekly post, I will do that as well. So back to today's show, I had a chat with Mamoun Malkawi. It was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. He goes through the career path that got him to become an SE, which was fun. And he went through what I would say a traditional career path, and he will discuss that a little bit more, but in a very untraditional way where he had to actually move continents to make it happen. So have a listen. If you like it, share it on the Twitter world, tweets, or LinkedIn. Let's jump right in. Hey Mamoun, good morning.
Good morning. Hi Ramzi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm happy you came all the way from UAE just to do this podcast, from what I understand. So thank you for that.
Yeah, welcome. You're welcome. It was a great coincidence, but definitely I'll give credit to that. So thank you very much.
All right, well, I appreciate it. All right, so maybe we can start off the way I usually start off, by letting the folks listening know who you are and what you do.
Okay, great. So I'm Mamoun Malkawi. That's my name. I work in telecom, mostly in networking as a sales engineer. So just a little bit about my background. I finished university in 2008 with a master's degree of electrical engineering in Kingston, Ontario. So I'm a Queen's University graduate, and I joined Nortel Networks at the beginning, working on mainly in a technical support role. That was mostly my early career, was mostly in technical support. I enjoyed it very much. So it was various product lines and technologies, mainly in IPTV and then IP telephony products. And then I moved to Alcatel-Lucent. I think it was around 2008. That time, 2009, and I was again working in technical support, mainly in networking management, and and then I moved to a professional services role, okay, or a field engineer role with Alcatel-Lucent again, but in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And it was a different product line. It was the enterprise product line and IP switching and routing. And again, it was mainly based on a technical support or professional services role. And slowly, after a couple of years, I had transitioned into a sales engineer role or a pre-sales role, as we say it. And now we're working in an independent company called Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise. It was spun off as an independent company for enterprise networks, enterprise communication solutions, like IP telephony and IP networking. And that's where I am right now.
Okay, so you mentioned you were a support engineer at Alcatel-Lucent in Ottawa, which is where we met.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden, you became a professional services engineer in Dubai. How did that happen?
So I was born in I had family ties to the United Arab Emirates, and at that time when I was in Ottawa, I noticed an opportunity pop up for uh, it's a professional services engineer job, but it was also a blend of technical support. So it was both. It was both a technical support role and a professional services role. So what they did was they had a pool of the post sales talent in that division, which is now Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise, and that team could do both either a revenue generating professional services job or escalation or escalated technical support job, basically. And that opportunity came up, and I took advantage, and I guess I made it through the interviewing rounds, and I was selected. So I thought it was a good idea. I'll try it out for a few years, and it's about 7 years now,
Yeah.
and I'm liking it. Yeah.
So how did it pop up? Like, did you find a posting on the Alcatel-Lucent website, or did someone tell you about it?
No, it was actually a posting on the Alcatel-Lucent website. It was simply an internal posting on Alcatel-Lucent website, and if I remember correctly, they used to send out a weekly email with some interesting internal postings throughout the company. I don't think I even was going actively searching for opportunities at that time. I think it was a general email, advertising openings within Alcatel-Lucent, and I simply looked at the job and the location. I kind of liked it. I also wanted at that time I wanted to diversify the product lines that I work on. So at that time I was working on network management to begin with, and I thought I wanted to get more node experience on IP switches and routers.
So just
So
go ahead.
yeah, so I thought it was a good chance to diversify my product line experience, and that was one of the triggers for that.
Okay, so it didn't, like, having ties in Abu Dhabi made you want to go, but that didn't give you any other person could have seen that posting and applied to it, right?
Correct, absolutely.
Okay.
So it was exactly, and my understanding was that there were a couple of other applicants at that time within Alcatel-Lucent. I don't know if it was from Ottawa or elsewhere, but it was probably globally at that time. So the team, the management of that team was in Germany. It was a German manager, good friend of mine. Later on, I mean, we became friends. And what they do is they have remote people set up in the different geographies to basically respond to customer escalation. So if a customer had an issue and they had a ticket that has been basically with the remote support with level 2 and level 3 support, but they needed on-site presence to do a certain network change or a certain apply a certain patch or do some extra troubleshooting. That's when this team responds, and it was called the field engineer at that time. That was the title, which was basically responding to escalations, and at the same time they could also respond to professional services work if it was in the same geography as well.
Can you define professional services, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. Professional services is basically, my understanding again, is basically any work um, done by the vendor to as a service to implement or to consult on the solutions that they have sold to that customer. So, and this becomes a bit important in, maybe we can talk later about that in the model that we have, which is an indirect business model. So, this is where you have a vendor, for example, like Alcatel-Lucent in this case, and then you have a system integrator. So, you have locally uh, partner companies, system integrators that actually sell the solution to the customer. So, the Alcatel-Lucent works with the system integrator, and then the system integrator works with the customer. In many cases, the customer directly needs vendor assistance for implementing, for example, the networks, for doing any configuration changes, or for consulting on on the solution in general, on the implementation of their solution in general. Typically, this is a paid task, so they would be provided a quotation for a certain amount of time or a certain amount of scope that they want to implement, and that would be implemented directly by the vendor in this, which is, for example, Alcatel-Lucent. That could be remotely, a job can be done remotely, and then the deliverable would be provided, or it could be an on-site job where somebody actually flies in to execute a certain task.
So it was more of a post-sales position at that time.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was definitely a post-sales position. Now, when you talk about post-sales position, that could be either you're responding to maybe an issue, or troubleshooting a particular problem, in which case it falls under the technical support hat, or it was implementing a professional services job, again, which is under basically a professional services hat.
All right. And so you mentioned you worked with partners. Did you work with a customer directly, or was it just through partners?
No, we worked with customers directly. Absolutely, we worked with customers directly. The partner and customer relationship was mostly the formal relationship, or the official relationship. Let's say when a customer wants to actually place a PO and go for or for example, select and go for a solution from a particular company, like, let's say, Alcatel-Lucent. But the engagement with the customer directly was always there. So we are in touch with customers directly, with or without the presence of a partner. Obviously, good partners are always there. You know, this depends on the particular case, on the particular partners. Depends on the account manager. Some account managers are dedicated for a particular channel, so they only exclusively work with partners directly. Some account managers are exclusively direct touch, which means that they are supposed to go and hunt for new customers, or they're supposed to work directly with customers, and so the partner becomes a little bit less significant in that situation. However, in any case, a partner needs to always be there to fulfill the commercial transaction, and to fulfill basically some basic implementation procedures. Obviously, they're supposed to be trained at a certain level on the company solution. But going back to your question, the engagement between us, Alcatel-Lucent, both at that sales, pre-sales, and post-sales level, was always there directly with the customer.
Okay, because I've heard of situations where people like from like, let's say company A has a reseller in some country who works with a customer. Company A does not have access to the customer. Everything, like if they need to train somebody, they have to train the reseller to do stuff, whether it's technical or not, whether it's just a sales type situation or a technical situation. So it's good that we clarified that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this what you said is also accurate, and it depends on the geography. So, for example, if it's for example in Dubai or the vicinity, we did have local presence as Alcatel-Lucent, or as in your case. So, if the company does have physical presence, then they would have, for example, ability to do training, ability to engage directly with the customer within that geography. But in some cases, the only way to reach a customer is through resellers only, because simply there's no physical presence for that company. So it depends on the country, depends on the geography. But that could be the case, as you described. That's true. It does happen. Sometimes the only way to reach a customer is through the reseller or the system integrator. And that's really the purpose of the system integrators, is to get market reach beyond the physical presence or beyond the limited reach of that company, in terms of the vendor.
So more feet on the ground, basically.
Absolutely. More feet on the ground, more coverage, and definitely addressing more customers that maybe in terms of size and in terms of complexity, that they could be directly managed at the reseller level. So the reseller would be, or the system integrator would be sufficient in addressing that customer's needs and requirements. So it sort of offloads a lot of work from the vendor.
So as a professional service engineer, like we're not even when at the point where you became a sales engineer. At the professional services role, how did you interact with the vendors or the customers?
So in terms of professional services, if we talk about professional, so are you asking about post-sales in general or professional services in particular?
Professional services. I believe post-sales are like field engineer. You have a problem, you go fix it. It doesn't matter if you're working through a reseller or not.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So as a professional services, how is it?
Good. So as professional services, so there's a couple of ways of engagement. The standard way is basically the customer would be talking to the account manager of either the reseller or of Alcatel-Lucent, to wanting to go for professional services to execute a particular task. Obviously, in many cases, a lot of negotiation happens to try and get that as cheap as possible, or for free even, or go for a full-fledged professional services quotation. They'd get a quotation, and once they agree on that, we typically have within the professional services team, we have dedicated project managers, and these project managers are responsible for assigning the resources needed and scoping out the particular project, that basically manage the professional services as a project. And we'd be contacted through those project managers, again working on the particular scope, sometimes doing the estimation. Sometimes we get involved as professional services early on, even before the customer engagement, to actually estimate and scope out the particular project that is required in terms of what the customer is asking. That could mean that we even engage with the customer even before we agree on or finalize the scope, to actually understand what they need. Sometimes they might need something, but the way that they explain it or the way that they lay it out is different. So we have to make sure that we hear it out directly from the customer, understand what they need, what they're looking for, and then we scope out the particular project with the assistance of the project manager. And once that's closed and everything is finalized, then we begin directly the engagement. The logistics and the scheduling and all of that is done typically by the project manager, and we simply show up at the particular day and time to execute the job. Now, this is basically let's say the most typical or simplest way of doing that. There are cases where you have some strategic large customers who are basically have a ongoing professional services relationship with Alcatel-Lucent. So they'd have basically throughout the year a certain amount of time dedicated for them, or a certain amount of consulting time that they need as part of the deal. So with these customers, the relationship becomes more direct, more personal. At that time, we can simply skip, or not skip really, but we don't really need the direct intervention of a project manager. We simply directly work with the customer whenever they need on whatever they need. It's more of a consulting on the go basis. If they need site presence on a certain day, we can work it out depending on my availability at that time, or we can simply work out things remotely. So with these select customers, the relationship is a little bit more direct and less formal in that sense.
So you mentioned you would skip the product manager or the project manager? Just
Project manager.
okay.
Project manager.
Sorry, I misheard then. Good.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So you were in professional services. Even at professional services, it seems that you don't work with the business partner as a professional services. You kind of the business partner works with your account manager. The account manager works with your team, and then you work with the customer directly.
That is correct. That is the correct. But I wouldn't say that's 100% accurate. The business partner would still have professional services or post sales team available, and typically they should. I mean, they should be there all the time, depending on the particular customer. Um, Whenever we are executing or whenever we are doing a particular job. But that's not the case all the time. Typically, with site interventions, a business partner is there. They need to be there to make sure that it's their customer as well as our customer. So it's in their interest to have somebody is there to understand the network as well and understand what changes are going on in the network. That's for site presence. For remote work, they're typically at least involved and kept in the loop in most cases with all the work that's happening between between us and the customer.
All right, perfect. So when you were in professional services and then you moved into the SE role, did being that's not even in English.
No.
Was the fact that you were in professional services helpful to you when you moved into the SE role?
Absolutely. I think it was. I think it was the experience that actually gave me an edge into becoming an SE role, and I think the ideal. This is not an exclusive thing, but the ideal background to have is a post-sales background when you want to move into pre-sales or sales engineer and SE role.
Why is that?
So I think it's multiple reasons. First one is when you're working post-sales, you're actually very familiar with the product. You're very familiar with the solution, with all the ins and outs, with all the nuances, with basically the targeted, and that's the important thing. You're more familiar with a targeted deployment. It's one thing when we talk about a solution positioning or a solution value proposition from an SE perspective or from an account manager perspective, as a sales perspective, versus what customers are actually using it for on the ground and how they're deploying it. So it gives you that. So there's sometimes, and typically these things are in sync, right? But in a lot of cases, there would be a gap really between what the product manager and the solution marketing team and what the solution positioning is intended versus what it can really be implemented as at a customer. Not because the solution is there's certain technical shortcomings or anything like that. No, but it depends on the customer use case. I mean, it's very important to understand how the value proposition of a particular solution really works for that customer. It could have a great value proposition, but in some customer scenarios, depending maybe on the vertical or on the size of the customer or on the skills of the customer, they may never implement it in the way that it's intended to be implemented. And so that post-sales experience, professional services, as well as technical support, I think is very important to understand the customer side of things, the customer field side of things, and being an SE, later you can bridge that gap and really understand how to position the solution in a better way to the customer. That's I think the major reason. The second reason is being familiar with or having that capability and ability to really do things like demonstrations, proof of concepts. It makes it a lot easier if you are familiar with the product, obviously, or if you're familiar with similar products, maybe in other with competitor vendors, if that was in the past experience of somebody's career. But it's I think it's very important for an SE to sort of have that post sales background. And I think typically that would be it. I mean, pretty much most of my, if not all of my colleagues, for example, SE colleagues, have come from a technical or a hands-on or post-sales background, and it gives you that particular understanding that is usually really sometimes not there with definitely not at the sales level in most cases, but also sometimes even at the um, let's say at the product management level or R&D level. So you work better as a customer advocate to understand that the product is actually fulfilling what it's intended to be designed for.
Do you mind if I challenge you a little bit on this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what if a sales engineer had a post sales experience, but in a different organization? Would that still be
Okay.
beneficial to him in the new organization?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, even if it's a different product line or a different company or organization, that's still beneficial. Uh, if you have that aptitude to work with um, products to configure products, get your hands dirty, um, you know, understand customer processes. I mean, I'll give you an example. In a particular, I mean, in normal post professional services work, we're all, I mean, really, regardless of the product line or regardless of the organization, there are certain methodology to proposing a network change to a customer, or knowing how to you never make any changes except in a downtime. You always plan things. You have a maybe a mop or instructions written out, approved. um, that type of methodology or that type of work is typical from a professional services perspective, and gives you an understanding of sometimes the sensitivity of customer networks, and the way that you want to execute things or upgrades at a customer. Uh, Sometimes that's not understood fully, or maybe sometimes we even forget about it if we talk too much about from a sales or a SE perspective. Um, that understanding is I think is crucial, irrespective of the organization or the product line. Obviously, if you're selling the product that you were implementing before, if you're in the same organization, same solution, product line, it helps more. It becomes more effective. But I think it's still important, even irrespective of the organization you go for.
Thanks, Mamoun. You answered it exactly the way I was hoping you would answer it, so that was
Okay.
perfect. Uh,
Okay.
and I agree with you. Basically, at least even if we're going from one company to another company, being in support helps us work with the customers better because we're dealing with customers. Helps us work under pressure and
Correct.
helps us deal with them like properly and not on the first sign of pressure actually just break down. Because I've seen that happen in different places where
Yeah.
a post sales engineer would just break down in front of a customer. I was like, okay, that's not very helpful. Please go away. What's a mop? You mentioned mop.
A MOP method of operation, basically a set of instructions and maybe possibly staged procedure that is supposed to be executed live at a customer. You know, simply, for example, if it can be like a upgrade. Let's say you're upgrading a network router or network switch. A MOP is basically a set of instructions on how to do that step by step. Uh, it depends on the terminology. Sometimes it's called MOP. Sometimes it's just simply instructions, upgrade instructions, or anything like that. It's just basically a set of instructions on how to execute an activity that's supposed to happen during downtime, basically.
Eh,
Typically, it's written after staging or after testing that procedure out in a lab.
And you're basically writing it to someone who doesn't know how to use the product to be able to use it.
Exactly. I mean, the ideal situation is that as a standalone document, it would serve as a guide to actually execute the entire thing, even if obviously you'd expect some level of training for whoever is touching the network. But yeah, it's supposed to serve as a standalone guide, full guide to actually achieve the or execute the operation.
Yeah, when I first moved into the network design role at Nokia, I had to write a couple of mops for upgrading. And it
Yes.
was actually for people who've never done upgrades and don't know how to use the product, because I wrote the method of procedure as detailed as possible, and it came back to me. It's like, you didn't say where to hit enter. Like, seriously?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I mean, that's the intention. But if somebody is looking for where to hit enter, I'd be worried about them even touching the network.
I was worried, and it was with a big
Yeah.
company. Like, I'm like, oh boy. All right. Well, I
Oh
think
boy,
that what they're
exactly.
trying to do is just make sure that they don't get any blame, like, or as us as a
Sure.
company, we don't get any blame, because they can come back and say, well, you didn't say to hit enter here, right?
Exactly. Sure. I'd understand. Exactly, and it's not. It's meant for maybe liability purposes, more than really having an instruction.
Yeah.
But it's also good to basically as an archive. First, as proof that we've actually staged this. This procedure works. We've tested it, and basically as an archive that to basically later on come back to the steps that were actually done and find out what happened. Uh, Especially if somebody else takes over that project or so or something. But I agree with you. I mean, it's meant for as doing this for quote unquote dummies. Maybe that I mean, so somebody who hasn't really touched the network, but it's almost never the case. I mean, usually people who are doing it they know what they're doing, either from a customer side or from the from the vendor side.
I really hope so. All right, so
Uh,
you moved from then you moved from professional services to an SE role. How did you do that?
Correct.
And
That was a bit of a very interesting experience actually to me. It's in the team we were in, it's quite a small team in Dubai. I knew the SE guys very well, the SE manager very well. I knew the account managers well. It's a very tight knit office community. We're not even 20 people within the enterprise division, right? And at that time, I was looking to take a step in a different direction a little bit in my career. I liked the SE role at that time. When you work in post sales, at some point, and this depends on the individual, right? Some individuals are great and they last, they retire as post sales engineers, whether in professional services or in technical supports, and that's great. Um, and But for me, at some point, I got a little bit tired of always meeting a customer, and this is especially in the technical support side of things. You're always meeting a frustrated customer who's always angry, always negative. They're facing an issue. They want you to solve it. Obviously, they're not happy. It's your job to make them happy, to diffuse that situation, and that's what we did, or we tried to do at least. But I when I was looking at my SE colleagues, I was a little bit jealous that they're going out there in front of customers who are anticipating their presence. They want to hear more. They want to talk, so they're more positive. Whereas, when I met customers, they're always very angry at me. Maybe not the company, not me personally, but they're having issues. Maybe they're not getting the fix on time, or for some certain reason, they have a certain pain that we need to resolve right away. And that's also, in a sense, even when you're doing professional services. In many cases, I mean, professional services are typically seen as expensive by a lot of customers, maybe even most customers. Maybe they're even unnecessary in their opinion, that they're supposed to get this for free, either from the vendor or from the business partner. So I was looking for some sort of a change, and so but at the same time there was no opening, there was no opportunity, let's say, at that time, sort of a direct opportunity to join the SE team. So what I did was I at that time I had talked to the sales and the SE management within our local team in Dubai, um, and basically I expressed my interest in that I'd like to join the SE team or ramp up into that role, whenever the opportunity comes up. And I was working with them well at the I mean since I joined the team. I think they liked me. I guess we had a very good relationship, even at the personal level. And they're like, okay, at this point of time, there's no maybe direct opportunity, but what we can do is, we'll work on it maybe, if you give us a few months. I think it took about a year, but in the meantime, why don't you try to do something that is a blend of both? So basically, I'd join more meetings with account managers, I'd shadow other SEs. I would, for example, start working on solution design or BOQs and things like that. I'd be allowed to, give presentations for a certain customer, depending on the product line and depending on the situation. So they were actually very supportive, and I really credit them for that. In that they allowed me to sort of test the waters and have a transition quite nicely into the role, without officially joining, or without even having really the opportunity. I mean, I thought in my mind, if this never actually materializes, at least I got the opportunity to test the waters with the SE role. And you know what? At some point, it must happen. I think. I mean, there must be at some point an opportunity, and that's actually what happened. I mean, it was quite well. It worked out quite nicely. It took about even more than a year, maybe, for me to actually officially join into an SE role. Um, and even until today, I mean, because we're such a small team, I'm actually still helping out with the post sale stuff. I mean, I still, to this day, I'm even being an SE or sales engineer, I'm still involved quite. I won't say heavily, but significantly with post sales work. Definitely from the planning and estimation perspective. Sometimes execution, sometimes even technical support. So we're actually now even in our organization, and I see that happening quite frequently now. In recent restructuring, we actually end up being the same team, SE and professional services and technical support. So all the technical resources, whether from a pre-sales or post-sales perspective, are under the same management. So it makes it a lot easier for cross-work type of opportunities, and that's really what happened in my case. So even to this day, I haven't really 100% let go of post-sales work while being an SE. And when I started out being an SE, I was really a post-sales engineer, transitioning into an SE role.
Okay, so just to clarify, when you say technical support, are you talking about field engineer or like remote technical support, or both?
No, I'm talking about field engineer. So I'm not talking about sort of the standard tech sort of teams that are typically central teams. So they're in a so not that type of technical support. It was field engineer type of support. So as a field engineer who could obviously intervene remotely as well, but also can intervene locally at the customer. So technical support meaning field engineer or professional services engineer from professional services perspective.
And are you finding it useful to be an SE role who's still doing some post sales work?
Good question. That's a good question. Because I challenge myself with that question. Actually, it's sometimes when the pro serve work gets a bit too much, takes you away, and then uh, you're thinking that maybe that's not as useful and that I should focus more on SE work. But in other times, actually, the work that I'm still doing with ProServe or technical support does actually give me insight and give me an, I don't want to say a clear-cut advantage at this point, but it does give me definitely it contributes positively to my SE work. That's I'm fully convinced of that. It's just about time management a little bit. Maybe I would say I do 15 to 20% of pro serve and technical support work versus 80% as a SE role. I'm a SE in title and in everything, as in a position, but I'm still involved in pro serve work, and that 80-20 split can sometimes mean really 100 and 120 split. So sometimes, that can translate to more work, and sometimes things go a little bit smoothly. It's when I have some bandwidth, so I can dedicate more time into post sales work. To me, post sales is always an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity. Any new problem that I am working on from a post sales perspective, and this is when I say a problem, I'm talking about some network issue that I can at least remotely get involved with, or at a high level get engaged. Maybe I don't own it. I'm not, I'm simply sometimes a point of contact between technical support teams and the customer. But just getting involved, I feel that I learned something new. Because it's a new problem, which is going to have, sometimes it's an old recurring problem, obviously, but in a lot of cases it's a new problem, and what the solution is, and it gives me better insight as a sales engineer for sure. So that's really how I'm trying to keep that balance. So I think overall, I think it's good for me in terms of skills, in terms of knowing how to really achieve a SE role or execute on my SE role. But at the same time, it requires a lot of time management, good time management, and it needs obviously management alignment. And in my case, it's quite easy because it's really the same management. It's the same team for SEs and post sales folks, which is great. I think. It's depends on the organization, but it works out very well for us. So that's so time management, alignment, obviously, and really just understanding what the priorities are in terms of, I'm still an SE. I still own, along with the account managers, we own a target that we need to achieve, we need to execute on. And so that still needs to be the priority of our work.
I think when it comes to being an SE, as long as you hit your quota, you can do whatever you want. And
absolutely, yeah. I think that's the key thing here. And the other thing to remember is that when customers, I deal with the same customers mostly. Basically what I mean is a lot of customers that I am meeting as a SE, they know me as a professional services guy or as a post sales guy, and that gives credibility. That gives some credibility in front of the customer versus just simply an account manager. Yeah. And that credibility really is quite valuable and it helps. I've seen it. It helps close deals. It's a key factor. Not just as me as Mamoun, but even with my colleagues, even in general. Once the customer sees you as a SE who's really more aware of the technical details of their network, number one, remember, because knowing a solution doesn't mean that you know the customer network. So if you know the network, that's even more valuable in terms of credibility and reputation.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. There's a trust that happens. I think, I'm not sure about this, and this is my opinion, but people can buy from an account manager that they don't trust, because in general, people are weary of account managers just because of their job is to sell. But if there's an SE that they don't trust, I think it's very hard for the customer to buy, because they don't know if they're telling the truth. Anyways, before we move on to the next section, I wanted to talk to you. I'm curious about this. You've worked in North America. You've worked in the Middle East. When dealing with customers, I'm sure there are cultural differences. Can you give us a few examples of the cultural differences, how you deal with different people?
Sure, definitely. I feel that in the North America and even in Europe, I've dealt with European customers as well. because being in Dubai also, I was in my early professional services days. It was a Europe, Middle East, and Africa team. So I used to work with customers in Europe as well. Um, in the West in general, and this maybe comes back to the size of the customer and the complexity. Customers are more structured. They're typically an organization. They can be a really sometimes a very large organization. They're structured, so dealing with them is more. I don't want to say more professional versus less professional, but it more adheres to organizational practices. I mean, there's dedicated teams for things, dedicated responsibilities, and so the relationship is more of by the book, so to speak. So, if you're dealing with a particular team, there's a networking team, there's a IT team, there's a, operations team, there's a planning team, design team, different teams to do different things. And so sometimes even you can be doing a professional services job for a customer, but you only work with one team. And maybe you may never even deal with other teams at all. And so things are a little bit more understood, they're more structured. Of course, there is definitely always a personal relationship that develops, absolutely. But from an organization level, it's more structured. In the Middle East, things are a little bit wishy-washy, you get a lot more of a single point of contact for things. I mean, sometimes you talk to one person in the customer, or you're dealing with that person, and he's responsible for end-to-end, things from the design to the procurement of the solution to actually implementing and managing the network. And so it's the personal side of things becomes more valuable. You need to develop a good relationship. If the customer doesn't like you personally, you're gonna have a very hard time to sell, even though your solution makes sense and is really sometimes is the best for them in that situation. So you have to map people out personally. You have to build a good relationship with them at a personal level to start with. Second of all, things are they expect the vendor to be, to them, they're dealing with a regional sales office, so they're always usually maybe talking to 1, 2, 3 people maximum at the early stages of the sales cycle for in terms of when they're looking out for a particular solution, and so they expect you to, if they work with you, they expect you to know everything, and you're really you become a single point of contact. I mean, you become an SE who is also a point of contact for other product lines, number one, and a point of contact for logistics and supply chain issues, and sometimes a point of contact for technical support. If they have an issue, sometimes they can call me up and say, I'm having a network issue. And so I have to sort of steer them into, the standard, open a ticket and have somebody respond to you, that particular support process. So things are, the personal factor is very important then. And so, that's where the lines are a little bit blurred with, is it technical support? Is it professional services? Sometimes they expect things for free because they believe this is supposed to be a network issue defined, not a particular, change of configuration. Sometimes they expect implementation as part of the solution to be built in. And that's really, that also depends on the expectations set by the account manager. But other than the cultural differences, I think it's just the way that things work. Maybe in the Middle East, you get a lot of dependencies on single people, where first of all the personal relationships matter more. I think, or let's say they have more impact, and at the same time it makes it it's easy and hard. I mean, it's harder to have things. Sometimes it's harder to satisfy customers, and it's harder to steer your way around the customer. But when you really don't understand the particular structure, there's no real structure, to working with that organization. But at the same time, it could also be easy for you to close a deal. If you know a couple of people and then you get them on board, that can make it a lot easier to actually close a deal. So that's really one of the main things that I found that initially you struggle with, really, when you deal with customers. It's a different expectation when you move from North America or even from Europe, or working with a European customer or North American customer, versus working with a customer in the Middle East. I mean, sometimes we work with customers. It's simply one guy calling the shots end to end. If he likes you, he'll buy, he'll implement, and he's the go-to guy. And sometimes, if he hates you, it doesn't matter who else likes you. You have to make sure that you actually align that guy with your company and with your solution.
All right. So if I were to summarize, yeah, you would say the main difference would be that in the Middle East you can build a relationship with one person and that'll help you close deals, whereas in North America you'd have to build relationships with multiple people, whether it's from like the technical person, then the manager, and then the procurement person or the director to get the deal done. Is that an accurate summary?
I think that's accurate. I think that's accurate. I mean, don't get me wrong, and we do have customers where you need to actually map the all the levels, but it's what you said is accurate fairly to a degree. That it's more of a personal decision. In maybe in the Middle East, it's more of a personal decision than an actual evaluation of the company and the solution. And that can be, sometimes it can be quite frustrating for an SE, because it's our job to actually technically sell the solution. And if sometimes you do your job, you position the solution, you give the value proposition quite well, and you thought you did really well, and maybe you did, and maybe it was, but it was sometimes never meant to be. That that you're never going to buy from us or from the other company, and it can get a little bit frustrating sometimes. But if you have that understanding, then you simply know that it's some deals are just not meant to be, and it helps you focus on what deals to really work on, versus what deals that are basically really there's no. I mean, the deal qualification is quite important in that scenario.
All right, cool. I like it. And now it's time to move on to the. You've heard the show. What's the next round? The not so fire round. That was the weirdest way of saying it.
Okay.
Right, I'm not gonna cut it because it's real. All right, so the not so fire round. You've heard these questions before, I hope. So, other than a notebook and a pen, what is an essential tool that an SE should be using?
A marker and a whiteboard, preferably.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, marker.
Do you always have your whiteboard and marker with you in the bag, or do you use whatever the customer provides?
No, typically what the customer provides. I do use a whiteboard and a marker. I mean, we have those in the office everywhere. I like to use them. Definitely, it's quite important. I mean, you can have a presentation for a customer, but that I feel sometimes can lose engagement. A marker and whiteboard is very important, I think, to clarify certain things regarding the solution positioning. You can answer questions much better with a marker and notebook. Marker and whiteboard. And it's quite an essential tool. Mostly I use what the customer has, but I do have a marker in my bag as well. But I don't think I rarely use a marker. I mean, if the customer has a whiteboard, they'd probably have a marker. So
yeah,
that's it. Well, I don't carry a whiteboard with me. So
yeah, don't carry.
That'd be too difficult.
We should create a foldable whiteboard where you can just take it and put it on the table.
That's a good business idea, definitely.
Yeah, but like the tip here is carry a marker with you, just because I've been to customer sites that they have whiteboards, and then we start trying to use the markers. Oh, this one's done. Throw it out. This one's done. Like you go through like 3 or 4 of them before you find the right one. Whereas if you have your own pen, your trusted pen, it works.
Exactly. You trust it works. And another tool that I always use, but that's really when you're given a presentation, is a laser pointer. But I think that's not a SE specific thing, I think.
Okay. I don't like using a laser pointer from my perspective. I like to stand up and be at the whiteboard and pointing with my fingers. I'm tall enough to actually be able to reach the top of the if there's something at the top, I can reach it. It's just I don't
Good,
know,
good.
but that's just me.
Sure. No, for sure, for sure. And I think the body language also is more engaging than simply pointing with the laser, for sure.
Yeah.
It,
Well,
it could come in handy, but I agree with you. I mean,
that
definitely the physical engagement is important.
that and I kept forgetting the laser pointer, so I had to do that, and I got used to it. So
Yeah,
that's my
yeah.
reasoning. All right. Is there a book or resource that every SE should read or listen to or watch?
Oh, your blog is the first one, I think.
Thank you. I'll pay you
Uh,
later.
yeah, no problem. The I don't think I've really come into a maybe you can help me with that. A dedicated resource in terms of a book or documentation. Um, and it really, I think it depends on the company, the product. But I think the first most important thing is to look for internal resources. There's a couple of things. I mean, within the company. Uh, First one is definitely a good relationship with the product team and the technical support team. So if you want to ask a quick question, about a particular thing that the product supports or not, for example, something that may not be clarified well in the data sheets or in the literature, I think the best way is if you have a one-to-one relationship with the product management, with the product manager or the PLM, or the technical support manager. You can just shoot out a quick email, to clarify something, or a quick message, a quick IM. Then I think that's very effective in doing my job. Saves me a lot of time, and I'm uh, quite grateful that I do have that ability, that direct relationship with those guys. Uh, that's in terms of executing, your work. I think it's very important to look into your team's resources. We have a very good blog internally, and a mailing list
Like,
for knowledge sharing.
you're talking about like technical resources, right? Not
Correct, correct,
okay. Yeah.
correct, correct. Yeah, in terms of technical resources, let's say product resources. Uh, we have an internal blog that's quite valuable in the information that it has. It's excellent on knowledge sharing. So SEs around the globe within our company share ideas and answer questions. So it becomes like a knowledge base for a lot of things. And this is typically from SE. It doesn't really have to be from technical support side, but from a SE side, it's quite valuable. Um, Other than that, it's quite. I'm not really aware of any documentation. Maybe you can help me there. I know you have a list on your website.
Yeah.
Um,
So what I have on my website are books that I've actually read. But the one book that I would recommend for SEs, I have not read it. It's on my to read list. But lots of other SEs like uh,
right.
just talk about it nonstop. Is the Mastering Technical Sales from
Okay.
John Kerr.
Okay.
It's a
I heard about that book. Yeah.
yeah, it's a big book. So they say it's
I
comprehensive. It has everything that they need.
I
So
think I think I will make sure to read that quite soon.
yeah, it's on my.
Definitely.
Right now, I'm reading Demo to Win. It seems good, but everything that I'm reading there seems logical. Like
Okay.
hopefully most SEs know that already, and if they don't, then you should read the book.
Okay. Okay.
Demo to Win seems like a fairly
Okay.
accurate book.
Okay. Okay.
Or
Okay. Good.
demonstrating to Win. I'll have links to them on my show notes. I already have them recommended in other show notes as well. Um, so
Sounds good.
I like the fact that you recommended my blog. So my blog seems like a good
Yeah,
place
your
to.
blog, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely. I found it very useful. And it's excellent in getting perspectives of many people. That's really very valuable, I think.
yeah.
In,
So
in
I appreciate that. And right now, like the podcast is other people's opinions. The blogs have been my opinions, but I'm opening it up to other people. Like if you would like to write a blog post about something that you really want to talk about, like that's something I'm opening it up to anybody who wants
Sure.
to write a blog. Just because we need to share resources. I can give
Sure,
you my opinions, but it may work for my domain, not for somebody else's. So other opinions would matter as well, and we can have a
sure.
conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and that's good to know for sure.
Yeah,
If I'll try to do that if once it makes sense to me that I can actually contribute with a particular topic. I'll be reaching out.
sure, sounds good. So, all right. Is there an advice you would give an SE that you feel they don't get from anybody else?
Advice to give to an SE or somebody who wants to be an SE.
Either one.
First of all, for people who want to be an SE, let me start there. I think uh, maybe in this, and this comes back to my particular case. If you don't see a direct opportunity, maybe try to create your own opportunity. So um, try to shadow other SEs more. Try to go to sales meetings with customers. That helps a lot in understanding what the sales process is and what the SE role exactly is. Uh, because it's quite different than customer meetings when you're going to discuss an issue or a professional services job, right? Um, that's very valuable. So try to be engaged with SE work quite more. Even as a professional services engineer or as a technical support engineer, you can still be a deciding factor in closing a deal. And I've seen that happen even when I was a professional services engineer. Um, you can be part of the value proposition for a solution or for the company, right? So that's quite important. So engaging in sales meetings is very important with customers. At the end of the day, the company needs to sell to survive. They need to sell to pay everyone in their ranks. So I think the ultimate priority is to sell. And so being engaged with the sales teams, with the sales in sales meetings, although it can be frustrating at times because coming from a technical background, things to you are black and white. You may have a very solid, understanding of what the solution limitations are, or what the product limitations are. But in front of a customer, the last thing you want to talk about is limitations, even though you do need to talk about them sometimes. But you know, uh, and that's something that I struggled with. If you were in a post sales background, especially technical support background, and then you go into a customer sales meeting, you can feel that things are a little bit hypocritical sometimes. But I don't know if you feel the same way. But you need to align that with the understanding of what the context is, right? So it's very important to get in touch with the sales cycle, and that can position you well to become an SE later on. For people who are SE, I think they need to cherish it. Don't think, don't be too quick into thinking that you need to be a sales guy. Okay, just be patient, hang in there. I think it's very rewarding, and think really hard about what you want to do next, because this might be, I think, really a good place to hang in there for a long time.
So actually, I used to ask a time management question, but I just changed it for you. And my next question would have been, what's next for you?
Quite honestly, I haven't really made that decision. In terms of being an SE, I think I'm gonna be an SE for a while. Uh, I'm I may even retire being an SE, but I don't know. I and the main reason is I don't see myself at this point as an account manager. I don't think yet I'm there. Will I ever be there or not? I'm not sure. This is going to depend on a lot of things, I guess. But I quite enjoy being an SE. It's very at this point it's very comfortable. Not as in a bad comfort zone, but uh, it's a position where I see myself as you know I feel at least that I'm really strong in, or good at least for my feeling. I mean, I feel comfortable. Um, I may look at diversifying in technology and product lines in different solutions for sure, maybe down the road. But from the role being an SE role, I don't think that I'm gonna change anytime soon.
All right. So you're loving the sales, the SE role so much that you don't want to move
At this point.
at this point.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. So I did what you were, I did what you were warning against. In case anybody's wondering, after being an SE for maybe a year and a half, I decided to give the sales person role a shot.
Okay,
I did not really enjoy it for a
okay.
multitude of reasons. It wasn't the right time of my life. I had a newborn, and some other stuff happened. And
Yes.
then within 4 months, I switched back to being an SE because I didn't have an SE for that entire time. I was on my own, and I noticed
Okay.
that whenever I had the choice of calling customers up or working on a perfect demo, I would always prefer to work on a demo.
Yes.
Like, like it was more fun for me. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't the
Good.
right time in my life. Like, I enjoy doing demos. I
Uh,
enjoy working with customers
okay.
that trust me.
Okay.
So
Yes. 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 Absolutely. I mean, it's uh, even though the account manager and SE work together all the time, but they could be worlds apart. I mean, in terms of the personality, individual contribution. Um, I mean, of course, I'm friends with all the account managers, but being a sales guy is different than being an SE. It's quite different. I'm sure you know that.
yeah,
At least I can realize that as well.
and
I've
customers,
never been an account manager, but even to customers, they're different.
yeah,
Absolutely.
customers look at you very differently. They look at you
Yeah.
as that untrustworthy person. Although almost everybody we sell to have their own sales team with their own account managers, who they treat differently than when they treat our account managers, just because it's from somebody else, which kind of sucks for account managers. But good ones get over that and build
Sure.
trust with the customers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what the sales profile is. I mean, I think sales is a very difficult role to fit in. You need to be an account manager profile. I mean, you need to have the profile for a sales guy, and not all people have it. I think it's. I'm not sure if I have it or not. At this point, I don't want to. I mean, I don't want to go there at this point. Like I said, I think I'm more comfortable with the SEO role. You never know, as years go by. But yeah, it's like you said, it's a different role altogether for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll write a blog post about the difference in personalities. Uh, Here's the big thing. I know we're over. Do you have a second just for me to rant for a minute?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Please.
as an SE, you're treated as an adult who knows what they need to do. Right? You have a task that you need to do it,
Yes.
then you do it. As an
Sure.
account manager, you're treated like a child by not the customers, internally within your company. That you're
Yes.
getting called every 10 minutes. Did you close this deal? Did you close that deal? Like, how am I supposed to close that deal while you're calling me every 5 minutes? Let me work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you have a personality where you want to be independent, that might not be the best thing for you, or you can learn to get past that. Like, I think you can learn to do almost anything. So that's one point. Maybe I'll put in a blog post about the differences, but I just want to share that.
No, no, definitely. Thanks for sharing that. But yeah, for sure. I mean, you have to, as a sales guy, you need to learn to manage your surroundings more, maybe than an SE. SE, you need to manage it for your own sake, but you can be a little bit more blunt. People expect you to be, you know, a technical guy who's a bit blunt. You can show your frustration a little bit. It's fine. They take it from you. But from a sales guy, maybe you have to be a sales guy. You have to be always, top notch. You have to be a good talker. You have to be a not a nice guy, but you have to be more engaging, I think, and that takes a different personality than an SE. Some SEs won't take it, or they'll have difficulty fitting in, like you said. But yeah, a sales guy is a sales guy. I mean, the pressure is tremendous. At the end of the day, it's the lifeline of the company. You
Yeah,
need to make the sale, and I believe in supporting salespeople. I believe in I'm a strong believer in that. Even though sometimes they can be outrageous, but still, you have to overlook and realize the fact that you have to overlook that and realize the fact that they are the lifeline of the company,
exactly.
essentially. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a very good point to end on. Mamoun, I really appreciate it.
For sure.
Thank you for coming all the way from Dubai for this.
You're
That
welcome,
this
and thank you. It's been a pleasure for
Yep.
sure.
I hope you enjoy
Uh,
your vacation with your family.
thank you very much. I will. I'm sure I will. It's been great so far. I really miss Canada. That's why I'm here. I'm here quite frequently, but I still miss this place for sure. It's a great place,
All right.
and hopefully I'll be back here sometime. One day
Yeah. Let us know when you come up to Ottawa.
for sure. For sure, I'll let you know. Definitely,
All right, man. Well,
it'll be great.
thank you, Mamoun. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Ramsey.
Bye.
We'll see you. Talk to you. Bye bye.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks to Mamoun for coming on. I enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that we're able to help some people gain clarity of what it takes to become an SC. It's not easy to become an SC. It's hard to break into that role, but once you're there, you kind of don't want to leave because it's a very fun job where you get to be both technical and a people person. So thank you for coming on. Subscribe to the newsletter, guys. I will be starting a webinar towards the end of September. Right now, the topic that I have in mind is how can an engineer break into an SE role. If you have any other topics you'd like to cover in webinars, let me know. Reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter world now, and or you can just email me through the contact form on my website. The show notes are at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show20. You'll find the links to the books that we talked about today. And if you have any good stories of how you became an SE, actually, that would be good. I would love to hear those. Send me an email, LinkedIn again, same ways. Anyways, this was a long show, so let's not drag it on any longer. This is Ramsey signing off.